Welcome to the next lesson in our module on basic Java features, where you will learn about Java's string class, which you can use to create and manipulate string objects. After completing this lesson, you will understand the purpose of the string class and know how to create string objects. You will also recognize some of the most common string methods and know how to call methods on a string object. In addition, you will be able to identify the difference between a string and a character. Finally, you will know the role the character class plays in Java programs. In this lesson, we are going to learn about Java's string class. Now, Java's string class is very different than the math class we saw in the last lecture. The math class simply was a collection of functions, but the string class represents a whole new data type that we can use in our programs. Up to this point, we have seen that we can have variables, which allow us to store data in our programs, and we can have methods or functions, which can produce results or do things for us. Now we are going to learn that it is possible for these two concepts to be combined to create new data types. These new data types will have values associated with them and also prepackaged methods that can process those values for us. We will label these types as object types and refer to variables of these types as objects. Initially, we will learn about some of the object types built into the Java language, and in a later module, we will learn how to create our own object types. In programming, an object is where we capture data and its behavior together in a single entity. Since the behavior code is provided for us by the creators of the class, this makes our job easier since we do not have to write that code. And in fact, it enables us to use the objects without knowing all the details about how they work. Writing programs that use these objects is called object-oriented programming, and it can greatly reduce the amount of code and the complexity of that code when you create a program. As an example, we are going to explore the string class. Every object of the string class has a sequence of characters in it, plus a collection of methods that can operate on that string data. And it is all wrapped together in a nice little package. Objects are described by a class. The string class is a specification for the data that is held in every string object. In particular, that a string object holds a sequence of characters and also the specification of the methods that can operate on that data. We already saw some string objects in earlier lectures in the form of string literals. The purpose of the methods, again, is to process or manipulate the data within an object in some useful way. For this to work, a method must know which object you want to process. To do this, we will use the same dot notation that we saw with the math class, but instead of using the class name before the dot, we will use the name of the object we want to process. When you do this, the method will be executed and it will process the data in the particular object on which it was called. Here are a couple of examples. In the first, we assign the string literal CDE to the string variable str1. In the second example, we are printing out the result of calling the concatenate method on the str1 object and providing the string xyz as a parameter. This gets the value of str1 and concatenates xyz onto the end, and the result is printed. Next, we have a string literal object abc, on which we are calling the substring method that will return the first two characters of the string. This new string is then assigned to the string variable str2. And finally, we print out the value of the string object str2, which prints the characters ab. So to review, to call a method of the string class, you must specify the string object on which you want to call a method, followed by a dot, followed by the name of the method, which is followed by any parameters inside parentheses. Now, when we call the concat method on the string object str1, it does not change str1. Rather, this method call returns a new value that is the result of concatenating str1 and the parameter string xyz. Since the method is returning a new value back to us, it is up to us to do something useful with that value, such as assigning it to a string variable or maybe even printing it out. Here are a few other examples of string methods. The substring method will return the substring that goes from index x up to but not including index y. The starts with method takes a string as a parameter and will return true or false depending upon whether the string object starts with that parameter or not. And the length method, which we use quite often, will tell us how many characters are in the string. Before moving on, it is important to note that several methods depend upon an index which specifies a position in the string. and that this indexing starts at 0 rather than 1, i.e., the first character of every string is at index 0, and the last will be at the index that is 1 less than the length of the string. Here are a few more string methods. The indexOf method will search for a substring and return its index if it is found, or the value -1 if not found. We already saw the length and substring methods, but we will note that there is an alternate version of the substring method that takes only a single parameter of the starting index and will go from that point to the end of the string. The 2 lowercase and 2 uppercase methods convert all the letter characters to lower or uppercase respectively. And finally, the char@, method will return the character at a specified index. There are many more methods in the string class, and the web has various reference guides and tutorials. To reiterate an important point that was made earlier, many of the string methods that appear to modify the objects on which they are called actually do not modify the objects, but rather they create new string objects and return them. For example, calling the 2 uppercase method on a string object s does not change the object s. If you want to change the object s, you must use assignment to assign the value that is returned by the method call. Finally, if you want to compare 2 string objects, you do not use the equality operator == as you would with primitive data types. This will not give you the results that you expect. So if you want to compare 2 string objects, you should use the equals method from the string class. Since we are talking about strings, it is a good time to take a closer look at the primitive type char in the character class that has a collection of useful methods. The char data type, and again some people might pronounce it char, is a primitive type that allows us to store a single character. Character literals use a single quote mark, in comparison with the double quote marks used for strings. And you can use the escape sequence to represent special characters. The string class has the char@ method that will allow us to access the individual characters in a string object. In this example, we use the char@ method to get the first letter at index 0 from a string, and then use that information to print out Cookie Monster Song. Recall that internally to a computer, all data is represented as 0s and 1s. As such, we need to specify what pattern of 0s and 1s will be assigned to each character of type char. This is done by giving each character its own value called its ASCII value. This is simply an agreement or standard that says that the bit pattern whose value is 65 will represent an uppercase A, while the value 97 will represent a lowercase a. By the way, this standard also ensures that our alphabet is correctly ordered, which allows us to sort characters and strings more easily. There are times when we may want to convert a character to its ASCII value and back. If you add a character and an integer, the result will be an integer. If you want to convert that integer back into a character, it would require a typecast, as Java will not perform that conversion for you automatically. And just because every character has an ASCII value does not mean that you should use that value in programming. It is considered poor style to use hard-coded ASCII values when you can use character literals instead. As we wrap up discussing the char type, let's make sure everyone understands the difference between char and string. We use double quotes to create string literals, and we use single quotes to create character literals. They are 2 very different entities that behave differently. A string is an object, and you can call methods on it. You can create new strings from it, and you can find out its length, etc. While a char is a primitive type, and as such it does not have methods. It only has the ability to store a single character. But just because char is a primitive type and does not have methods, does not mean that Java leaves us high and dry. Java does provide a character class that provides a collection of character processing methods, similar to how the math class provided a collection of number processing methods. The methods of the character class are all static methods, and thus they are not called on an object. Rather, you call them on the class name character, similar to how we call the methods of the math class on the class name math. And whereas the methods of the math class took numbers as parameters, the methods of the character class take characters as parameters. For example, if we had a character variable ch, and we wanted to know if it contained an alphabetic character, we could call the isLetter method from the character class and pass the character variable ch as a parameter. Here's a partial list of the methods from the character class, listing the method names, what parameters they take, and what values they return. This lesson gave you an overview of Java string class. Now that you have completed this lesson, you should understand the role of the string class in defining string objects and calling methods on those objects. You also now recognize some of the common string methods. In addition, you should be able to identify the difference between a string object and a character value. Finally, you should know the purpose of the character class and some of the methods it offers to clients.